Well. The San Francisco 49ers dropped a pretty embarrassing game, 27-24 to the Los Angeles Rams in week 3. They've got some issues. That's pretty clear. I've got my guy here, Marco, with me. We're going to be breaking down some of those issues and talking about where this Niners team kind of stands all after this. Welcome back to the program, everybody. I'm your host, Rohan Chakravarthi. Over there is my other host, your co-host here, Marco Martinez. How you doing, my guy?
I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
Doing good. I mean, Wednesday, you've gotten to process the loss a little bit. You've gotten to kind of see different things. And so we're kind of in a new light now when it comes to the Niners. Let's just talk about it, though, real quick. What was kind of your instant reaction when you kind of were going through that game with the loss and the way it ended up?
It was pretty interesting because I was actually in Seattle, right? I was watching it at a Niner watch party. Not necessarily a watch party, but like a Seattle faithful bar that they have right there in Seattle. And there's a couple of Rams fans there. And like at first, you go up 14, you're like, all right, cool. Like I told my wife, hey, if we're whooping on the Rams, which I was expecting to whoop on the Rams, because they're very banged up and everything. I was like, we whoop on them and we're up by more than 20. I was like, we're at 20 at one point. We'll just head out. Like we'll continue doing our thing in here out in Seattle. Um, didn't go as planned. Uh, felt like obviously Brock played really well. Can't deny that. Brock played really well. That's one thing that's for sure he did. But you also have a Hall of Fame quarterback on the other side who played really, really well. And I think that was the difference. I think Matthew Stafford was the difference in that game. At least our defense couldn't slow him down. And I wouldn't say slow him down because obviously they didn't put up extreme yards or anything like that. But he was extremely efficient, and I thought to me that was pretty dang good. Um, I thought defense could have been better. Um, Brock was pretty good, man. And I know Fortnite's throwback trying to get me going, asking, so I expect Brock to be perfect. I don't expect him to be perfect, but I expect when Brandon Ayuk's open to hit Brandon Ayuk. I expect Brandon Ayuk to catch the ball a little bit more. I expect you to trust your big time playmakers and not be throwing the ball to Ronnie Bell. Like that's the kind of things more so than anything. But I think that's a different conversation, and it's not necessarily on Brock's fault. What was your thoughts, Rohan?
No, this one was ugly. This one was really bad. I mean, when we talk about the preview, when we were talking prior to the game, I said if this game is close, that's a problem. If the Niners lose, that's a really big problem. And clearly it's a really big problem because the Niners lose 27-24. You saw really a meltdown at the end of the game. They had a 14-point lead in this one. They were up double digits in the second half, and you still found a way to lose. This was a game where the Niners had it in their hands, never found a way to close it off, and they ultimately paid the price for it. And it was weird, right? Because a lot of people said, I had a lot of narratives around Brock Purdy. This is going to be a prove it game for Brock. This is going to be the game that kind of tells people, other people were more skeptical. It's the Rams. You don't necessarily have a count. And you're right. I thought Brock played really well. I thought that he commanded the pocket well in terms of creating plays off script. And you could tell that, the offensive line who played well enough, but Brock was even able to manage whenever they kind of struggled. He got out of certain situations, didn't take many sacks, and so that kind of led to a really good productive performance from him dealing without Deebo Samuel, George Kittle. And, Brandon Ayuk didn't have the biggest game compared to Juwan Jennings. 11 catches, 175 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, just an insane game for Juwan Jennings in that one. But there were just some costly mistakes. You look at the way that this game went out, the Niners had 7 penalties for 113 yards. Some of the big penalties, Isaac Yiadom, 48-yard pass interference. That one led to Los Angeles' first score. Devondre Campbell, the 25-yard PI at the end of the game. There's no chance that you put Devondre Campbell one-on-one in coverage with the game on the line in that type of situation. There were a number of costly penalties. I believe Kyle Juszczyk had a block in the back or a holding call, on the second to last drive for the Niners where they end up getting backed up. It's 1st and 20, and then they are forced to kick a 55-yard field goal rather than drive down the field. That clearly gets missed. The Rams come back and they score. So there were a lot of little, smaller issues that kind of compounded. You clearly know about the drops. Ronnie Bell with 2 drops. Ayuk had a drop. Just a rough day specifically for Bell with the way that last catch would have ended the game, pretty much. And so there are just too many issues, with this team. Special teams, penalties, drops, and it all compounded into a really bad loss for the Niners. And this is one that's alarming, if we're being honest.
Yeah, there's no way they should have lost this game at all. It's an embarrassment. Probably one of Kyle Shanahan's worst losses as a head coach. You don't lose to a team who's this depleted. No Puka, no Cooper, and their offense is as efficient as it can possibly be. Running the ball at will to get first downs. Stafford hitting you with deep bombs. Like, that should not be happening with no Puka or no Cooper at all. It's inexcusable. Whether we want to blame Nick Sorensen, I know a lot of people were trying to say Brandon Staley, and Brandon Staley ain't the defense coordinator, so he ain't gonna get the blame. It's Nick Sorensen who's the defensive coordinator, and if Nick Sorensen is allowing Brandon Staley to be that guy who's making him call certain things, guess what? Stop listening to him. Because if you lose your job because of Brandon Staley, they're probably going to replace you with Brandon Staley. I think that's the next guy in line, and it's inexcusable. I think Kyle Shanahan needs to learn from this. Kyle Shanahan said in the press conference that they knew they were going to fake punt, and they let it happen. That's bullshit to me, Rohan. That's the absolute worst thing I could have heard this weekend. Kyle Shanahan saying
First,
that.
I do want to say, because it was this weekend, I do want to say a happy late birthday to you. You celebrated, it seemed, in great fashion with the Niners' loss. Wanted to say happy birthday to you. But yeah, I mean, that was you're right. The special teams, gaff, that was a big one. You had 3 really big ones, right? The fake punt that ultimately ended up helping the Rams score. Then you have the 55-yard miss, which is deep still. Moody missed it in a key situation. And then you have the 38-yard punt return at the end of the game after you were ending up punting near midfield. So 3 really big special teams issues in this game that ultimately all went in the Rams' favor.
Yeah, and special teams has to be better. I'm going to be the first one to say it. Brian Schneider got to go. He has to go, bro. It's an embarrassment when you have your defenses, your special teams that bad. Brian Schneider, I mean, Kyle Shanahan said they knew about the fake punt, right? Like, he said it publicly after the game. They knew that they were going to, at some point, they were going to go fake punt. Down 14, no life, no energy. What do you think a team's going to do? A lot of people said fake punt's coming when at the bar I was at. Watching the game, fake punt's coming. If fans are seeing it, shouldn't the special team coordinator see it?
Do you think it's a Schneider issue? In the sense, the Niners have struggled with special teams even before they hired Brian Schneider. Why is this issue recurring? Why does it keep happening? And how do the Niners fix this?
I think it's a special teams issue. More than a special team, I think it's a Schneider issue. Because you come in and you have everything you need, right? You have a good special teams unit. You drafted someone in the 3rd round as a kicker. You drafted a punter in the 4th round a couple of years ago. You have guys who are athletic on special teams. You got to put together a good system, and it's asking for perfection on special teams. It's taking the advice that other people in the room are giving you. It's doing what works around the league, and it just feels like Brian Schneider doesn't care. It feels like he understands that he's a special teams coordinator and there's not much for him to do. And I think he has to go, man. And there's a lot of capable coaches on the staff who could be a special teams coordinator. I'm just dumbfounded on how you can allow a team to get back into the game with a fake punt, knowing that it's being said on the headset by your head coach and other coaches on the team. That's just pretty bad, right? Like, It's like, hey, Rohan, I tell you, hey, don't don't go to the game this week because there's going to be a fan that punches you in the face, Rohan. There's a Wisconsin fan that was really pissed off at you. He's going to punch you in the face. Don't go to the game. And you still go to the game and you get punched in the face. Like, hey, I told you not to go because you're going to get punched.
It could have been a good game.
Like, right? Like, it is like, if someone tells you something, you're at least going to be alert. You might have your guard up. You're not going to allow it to happen. Even if you do go, you're not going to allow it to happen. And I think that's one thing where Brian Schneider was being told, and he just let it happen, like right in front of him. Oh, well, no way. You guys are right. They ran his fake punt. Like, that to me is inexcusable. It's absolutely inexcusable.
Now, special teams was an issue. What are some of the other issues that you're kind of seeing from this team that you might have a concern about that extends just past week 3?
Oh yeah, I think the rush defense. Rush defense has not been good. When you look at like the stuff percentages and stuff like that, stuff percentage is what you want from a stuff percent. Is essentially when you have a defense that's able to stuff the run, percentage of the run plays resulting in no gain or a loss. The Niners are the worst, one of the worst teams. They're ranked 30th at 11.6%. That is pretty bad, right? Like, your defense is constantly giving up plays. Rush yards per play, the Niners are 12th worst at 4.5. If you're allowing teams to run the ball at that high of a rate at 4.5 yards, they're going to continue to run the ball at you. They're going to continue to do what they have to do to run the ball at you. And I think, to me, that's one of the bigger issues right now for the 49ers is stopping the run. What it's not allowing the defense of the pass rush to do, and we get to the pass rush, the 49ers quarterback pressure rate, and I'm going off of NFL Plus stats. Shout out to Rohan for sharing that with me. So the NFL pressure rate that I'm looking at, the quarterback pressures or quarterback pressure percentage, whatever you want to go off of, taking a look at it. So the way NFL Plus does it, it's the percentage of dropbacks that the defense is causing pressure. The 49ers are ranked, taking a look at it. They are right now 13th in the NFL. And I think when you're paying a defensive line as high as you pay them, right? Like Nick Bosa, one of the highest paid players in the NFL. Javon Hargrave, now he's down for an injury. He's one $20 million defensive lineman. Malik Collins, I believe he makes around $10 million. They just brought in Leonard Floyd. You got to have a top 5 pass rushing unit when you're paying and invested that much into the unit. The fact that it's not top 5, it's causing the defense to be a little interesting. But I'm also going to talk about a reason why I think the 49ers defense is struggling a little bit. When you require your defense to rely on its players and being just the best defense in the NFL, like you're at least the best talent in the NFL, and you're blitzing at 14% in the NFL, you're not generating any additional pressure, any additional sacks from blitzes. You're allowing your front four to get after it, and when they're not getting after it and you're not dialing up anything, you become very predictable, right? Now, you can't stop the run on first and second down. I'm running the ball at 4.5 yards per carry. And now an offensive coordinator could get to his play action. He could get to the drop back. Is slowing your defensive line down just enough. And that's what's causing the 49ers defense to be off. They're asking the defensive line to get after the quarterback. They're blitzing Fred Warner on third downs more than I've seen in a while. Like, I think Fred should be the guy in coverage. He's the best linebacker in coverage. I've seen him be blitzed quite often this season, at least more than last year. And when you're that defense isn't going to hold up. It's not sustainable. You're asking too much from your players to be dominant, and when they're not getting after it, there's no change. So, for example, if you're in man coverage and it's not working, you have to start implementing something else. Can you go to different coverages? Can you go to zone? Can you go to cover 2, cover 4? Can you change things around? Can you blitz? Can you run a cover 2 and tend to hot? Can you do things? And I think right now Nick Sorensen is being outcoached, and he doesn't look ready to be a defensive coordinator. It's kind of what I'm looking at right now along the defense. The defense doesn't look like it's prepared. It looks like they're there's no adjustment, and when it's made, it's very late in the game. I know, Rohan, you text me, you were watching the film, you're like, yeah, the adjustments came very late, and that's what you could see during the games. When they week one, right? They didn't really have to adjust because one, I felt like Aaron Rodgers and that team was still kind of tiptoed. Aaron Rodgers was a little timid, obviously for various reasons, that ankle and everything, Achilles. Week two, you're getting beat by Sam Darnold, and you really never adjusted. And I think that's a major issue with the 49ers. Their run defense is a major issue, and their inability to change things up and blitz on key situations or situations that are unexpected. They're blitzing at the lowest rate, one of the lowest rates in the NFL. Obviously, they're 31st ranked in the NFL when it comes to blitzing. If your defensive line can't get after it with the high-paid players, you got to send pressures. You lose Javon Hargrave. That pressure rate needs to start increasing, or blitz rate needs to start increasing in order for your pressure rate and everything, your sack percentage, which is very interesting. The Niners have a pretty decent sack percentage. They're just not getting home and finishing plays, and I think that's the biggest thing what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the film. This was some really ugly film when you look back at it. Let's just break it down. Let's start with the defense, right? Marco pointed out run defense. Run defense is a concern. Run defense is a concern. There were two things that I kind of noted that the 49ers kind of struggled with. A couple of guys pointed it out on Twitter. 49ers struggle with duo plays. And I have to say something. I was talking with Marco a little bit about it before the show started. This wide nine style it's not working for the 49ers in the run game with their current defensive tackles. The 49ers defensive tackles are too widespread. Well, really that entire defensive alignment, the wide nine really being more helpful for pass rushing, they're too widespread. And the defensive tackles get moved way too much off the line of scrimmage, creating a significant hole up the middle where these runs are consistently churning out 5-6 yards, rather than you may be able to get some of the run stops where it's 1 to 2 yards. It's at least 3 to 4 yards with the potential for more. The run defense up the middle is a struggle. Malik Collins thought he had a really good game in the pass rushing realm. He had 5 pressures. He had a good effort. Maybe not really good, but he was productive enough in the pass rushing realm. But in run defense, he's consistently getting moved. And that was something the Niners knew when they picked him up, right? He was a pass rushing specialist. He was a guy who was going to get after the quarterback. He was a guy who really isn't the strongest when it comes to run defense. And so that's why I was curious, how is the pairing going to be with Javon Hargrave? I thought he had a really solid game. Go ahead.
Can I add something to what because as you're saying this, I'm looking up on the NFL stats stuff, right? Defensive run snaps that he's played, he's had 48 of them. Stops, he's had 4 run stops. And so that when we watch him, if you're going to be in the middle, you got to plug things, right? We haven't seen that. So you're 100% right there.
Yeah. And when you look at when it comes to, who was I talking about? Malik Collins, right? There are clear struggles. One thing that I'm noticing, Malik Collins, you talked about it, right? He has 4 run stops. I believe he's played 48, 49 plays. Where is Malik Collins tackling players when it comes to the run game? He's not tackling at the line of scrimmage. His average depth of tackle is 4.3 yards. It's 4.3 yards off the line of scrimmage. For example, when you're talking about other guys, Nick Bosa, he's at 1.8 yards, right? He's tackling players at the line of scrimmage. He's making some run stops, things like that. Fred Warner, the damn linebacker, right, who plays 5 yards off the line of scrimmage, he's tackling that 1.6 yards, his average depth of tackle. And so there's a clear difference with some of these guys. Even Leonard Floyd is at 2.7 yards, in his 40 run snaps whenever he's making a tackle. And so there's a clear difference when it comes to the stop rate for some of the defensive linemen, and they're struggling. They're struggling in the run game, specifically up the middle. The second part, and I think this is the more alarming part, that second defensive end, outside of Nick Bosa, is easily the worst defensive lineman on the team. I don't care who's being put in there. Leonard Floyd has been extremely non-productive thus far with the 49ers, and that comes both when it comes to run defense and when it comes to pass rush. Floyd was signed more so for his pass rushing prowess, right? a guy who many people have touted. Oh, he's gotten 9 sacks in a couple of years, couple of consecutive years. He's been durable. He doesn't miss games. Well, Floyd has 5 pressures this year. 4 of them came in week 1. He has 1 pressure in the last 2 games combined, and those 5 pressures have come with a 5.9% win rate. That's abysmal. That's really bad. Floyd isn't generating any pressure, and it's really clear on film. It's the defensive tackles up the middle that are generating pressure on interior defensive linemen, and then it's Nick Bosa who constantly gets double teams. Because Floyd isn't generating pressure, what do teams do? Guess what? We can double Nick Bosa. Guess what? We can double Javon Hargrave. Let the other guys try and win one-on-one, and we're consistently being able to protect our quarterback. The other thing, teams are also running at Leonard Floyd. When it comes to some of those stretch runs or some of the outside runs where they're trying to hit the gap right outside the tackle, well, they're running right at Leonard Floyd. They're allowing him to try and make plays, and they're running right at him. I think that that's also a concern, and I think that right now the defensive line, that spot's going to have to change. I don't know how they do it. I think that the Niners are definitely going to look at some upgrades when it comes to the deadline, because that spot right now is not being filled well. And when you consider the amount of money they spent on both Leonard Floyd and Yetur Gross-Matos, there's an issue. There's an issue.
Yeah, and even so you bring up a good point, right? Like when Yetur Gross-Matos, you want him to play more, obviously on base downs. He's a better run defender on the edge. But the thing too, though, is he's not as good of a pass rusher. So when he's in the game, if offense sees it, they could just start throwing the ball. Okay, your defense once doesn't really blitz, so I'm not worried about the blitz. 2, you're not getting pressure at a high enough rate when your pass rush package is in, which Yetur Gross-Matos is not part of. So when he's in, I can just throw the ball. I know I'm not going to get I'm not going to get blitz on first down. I could possibly have a successful first down, and I could get ahead of the chains. So for me, there's bigger reason. And when we talk about the wide 9, the reason why it's hard, and Rohan brought it up, the reason why it's hard to stop the run against the wide 9. You obviously have the guy that's out wide, right? It's easy to kick him out. Easy. You just got to have your tight end or your tackle kick out, down block, and it's a big lane. Now your guy on the outside, the opposite edge rusher, has to come cracking down. And then what happened is the moment we started doing that, you know what the Rams did? Play action heavy.
Yeah.
Play action heavy with the nice little boot action to give Stafford a little bit of extra time. And that's where we started picking us apart. Another thing, Rohan, that I noticed the 49ers struggled at in this Rams game. And I think
I think you're going to get to exactly what I'm thinking. Go ahead.
And I think it's been more than just this Rams game. I think it also happened with Minnesota, because Minnesota did it quite often in going bunches, but motioning out of the bunch, or motioning inside. What it does, the Niners had not been able to stop that. If I'm an offensive coordinator and I see that, I am doing that every drive at least once or twice. What happened was they used Tutu. At first, they started using might have been Johnson in the beginning. Johnson. They started using Tutu later in the game with it because he had the.
Was either Johnson or Whittington? I forget who. It was one of those two.
I believe it was Johnson before they used Whittington later in the game, but they were using Johnson on it. So what they were doing is Niners are manned up. Okay, they're manned up in a bunch set where 3 guys. You have your point, then you have your inner slot, and then you have your outside guy. Right, but the point guy is the main guy. Who needs to get the hell out. You need to clear shit out because we're moving, right? Well, they were motioning Tutu from the outside all the way in to the bunch, and they were having him go across the field in essentially a easy completion for Matthew Stafford, and it was hitting every single time it was ran for 10, 20 yards, and it was just everyone watching the game was like, well, Tutu's going in motion. You know what the hell's going on. You obviously see there's one time when Charvarius Ward's following him. Yadam's following him. It's like, okay, we're in man. He's going to get beat across the field because you're not adjusting to anything. And that shit hit every single time. No adjustment. And to me, when a defensive coordinator does not freaking adjust, He is outmatched and should not be fucking calling plays. It's plain and simple. There's no
Oh.
other way to put it. I mean, like, as nice as I could be, if you see this 6-7 times in a row, right? I don't remember last year, Rohan, when Fred Warner came out and said, "Hey, or was it Fred Warner or Demo, or it might have been safety we had last year who ended up leaving.
Gip.
Might have been Gibson. It was Gibson. He said, there's just not much we can do as a team or a player when you're in the wrong defensive call, no matter what. Like we can't do more than what the defensive play call is when it's the wrong call. Right now, what's happening is they're in the wrong call. And Fred knows it. Fred sees it because he was getting pissed. Fred kept, every time that play happened, he was pointing at exactly what is happening. If you're going to be in man and that's happening, you got to communicate, pass it off, or guess what? If you see that happening, that motion goes into the bunch, go zone. Go make them earn their yards. You're giving them free grass, easy ass completions for Matthew Stafford, and that's why he picked us apart.
No, and Marco's absolutely right. Specifically when you talk about the bunch trips that the Rams really, Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford picked the 49ers defense apart. It's a really smart strategy with the way the Niners, were going about things. They didn't change things up. They ran man. They consistently ran man in that situation. And the issue is, let's say you have the outside receiver, which in the middle and the end of the game, it was Tutu Atwell. When he's motioning in, well, you already have the bunch formation set up. You're now adding a third receiver to the bunch formation. The guy covering Atwell, which in instances was Travis Ward or Isaac Yiadom, he's in the back of the bunch defensively, and he's the one who's now going to have to trail the underneath route and try and find a way. Not only does he, one, have to react to all three routes to see where his guy is going, but two, he's going to have to trail the underneath route to try and figure something out. And that, unfortunately, really doesn't help the 49ers. That is something where here,
Rohan,
Marco,
I got you.
Yeah, go for it.
You break this down, Rohan. Break it down.
All right, let's start it. So Stafford, he calls this. You're going to now.
I'm going to pop and try to pause it, see if I can.
Yeah. You're going to now see Tutu Atwell, right? This is on Isaac Yiadom. Look how far of separation Atwell has against Yiadom because Yadom's coming inside, and now he's going to have to defend all of that space in the middle because it's man coverage. Whereas if you're passing it off, you either have Lenore or you have the safety that's able to play it, or you play zone, right? This is a clear mismatch for the Rams just because they're motioning a third guy in. Yiadom now, who's playing outside leverage, is going to have to read all three routes, and he also he's playing outside leverage. He's going to get beat on the inside, and that's a significant issue. This happened multiple times on both the left and the right side of the formation because the Niners were playing man. It even happened once where the safety, Jair Brown, he reads the inside leverage play, and so he looks to help there, or he's a little second late, and the Rams were able to hit the out route to the tight end. But here, you see how much space Tutu Atwell has. Matthew Stafford's a guy who is excellent with timing. He's excellent with timing right across the middle of the field. You're going to see it right here with Tutu Atwell, Rohan, I guess, across the middle of the field. It works.
And to me, this is what I mean by Nick Sorensen isn't ready to call plays, right? This is something that this wasn't happened This isn't the first time it happened. This is the second time it happened. I went to the second play because I remember this play to be exact, and it was a blitz. You see that they motion, and you should have an alert. Hey, if they motion, you gotta alert to Fred. I need you to take middle, and then you have to do something to adjust. This is a big game. This kills defenses. You have a stunt coming on with your linebacker's blitzing, right? You have Winters coming on a blitz, Leonard Floyd on a stunt, Fred on a blitz. There's no one there, man. You're a man across the board. It's bad coaching. It's poorly executed. And for me, this is something the 49ers need to adjust fast because like I said, when you play the Rams, they're going to do things that are really efficient. That's really efficient. When you start playing teams with faster guys, better weapons, obviously Tutu, no disrespect to Tutu, but not the greatest of weapons, but they were able to efficiently move the ball. And that was a pretty solid pickup for an offense. I believe it was 25-yard pickup. And it's inexcusable. It's truly inexcusable for the 49ers offense to be letting stuff like that happen, because it happened with Johnson once. It happened with Tutu. It happened with Whittington. Like, that
It happened
shouldn't
with
be
Tutu
happening.
multiple times, and it even happened to the tight end with Parkinson getting a free out route on a third down that ended up moving the sticks. This is an issue. And I will say one thing, Marco. I will say one thing that maybe, brings things a little bit back to, I guess, earth, in this situation. It's only week 3 for Nick Sorensen. I remember when D'Amico Ryans had his run, things were a struggle early on. Ryans took accountability. Ryans ended up changing things. Second half of the year, he's the best defensive coordinator in the NFL, and he gets a head coaching job. Now, do I expect the same right now with Nick Sorensen? No, but he is early in his tenure, but he has to understand that things have to change. You can't consistently run the same thing out there again and again, where the 49ers are getting beat by the same concept over and over again in the same game without making an adjustment. The 49ers made an adjustment late in the game when they forced the Rams, I believe it was the field goal drive that made it to 24-17. The Rams are in the red zone, and the 49ers ran zone on some of those concepts. You're able to stop the Rams and force a field goal. But that's way too late in the game for that to happen. And then, you still face some issues. There are a lot of things that need to change. Devondre Campbell should never be in coverage. He can't play coverage. I don't know why the Niners continue to throw him out there. He can't play coverage. Defensively, the defensive line, you're going to need to find a better way to stop the run. That might include more bear fronts, and that's something I was going to ask you about. Do you think the Niners should involve more bear fronts now to help their defensive tackles, given the way that they're being moved, just because the wide nine right now, it's struggling when it comes to the run defense?
And I'm going to show a play, because I know you did mention they did adjust a little bit, right? Like, obviously, let's take a look at an adjustment.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and share my screen. And this is something me and Rohan were talking about. And I know I went on a little rant, because I'm kind of pissed on how Sorensen's been calling this defense a little bit. So right here, we got a 3-by-1 set, right? You're going to come into the bunches. They're going to have 2-2 motion in. They're in man. You could see. Pay attention to Fred. He alerts this. He knows what they're trying to do again, right? Hey, they're in man. I'm gonna alert. Watch this. This is changing, but now you're still, and it needs to be, if you're going to run this kind of coverage, how are you passing things off? What's the communication like? Obviously, you see Fred pick this up. Devondre Campbell has the running back out of the backfield.
But look at the outside. This is the ball that I'm talking about to Parkinson, where it's the same bunch formation. And guess what? Lenore, he's working out of the slot to get the outside guy. But that leaves Jair Brown in such a bad situation, because he's initially carrying, Brown's in the back. He's the one who initially carries with the receiver, but he realizes that the tight end has the out route. And it's perfect, because this is a ball that all you need to do is just move the sticks here. I believe it's third down, and it's a perfect completion and a great sequence of plays between Whittington and Parkinson to get the open receiver. It's the exact same concept, where the 49ers pick up one part of the play, but they can't pick up the other part, because, again, you're stuck in a bad situation in man coverage with your leverage.
And the thing, too, though, is that play, what to me was very interesting on that play, right? It's 3rd and 2, fourth quarter, 10 minutes left. Ball's going to come out quick. 1, their O-line isn't great. 2, they've been getting the ball out. Stafford's been getting the ball out quick all game, and you're manning up still. Like, that, to me, it doesn't make sense. So that's just my rant on Sorensen. I think he could be much better. He is not ready to call games right now, and offensive coordinators have gotten the best of him as of right now. Now, one thing we could say about Nick Sorensen, he has time, right? I don't think he's going to get fired anytime soon. He has time to adjust. Can he adjust? The thing is the 49ers defense is worse. It looks worse now than the first couple of games with Steve Wilks. Remember when everyone was calling for Steve Wilks within the first 5 games? It looks worse now than it did those 5 games with Steve Wilks. And that's my biggest concern and why I'm so frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, right now, like I said, it's a wait and see. but the Niners can't really afford to lose games because of poor defensive play calling, because of poor defensive game planning, right? Hopefully Sorensen does pick it up. And it's like I said, it's early. You don't want to be waving the white flag right now and see a significant change in the second half. We're going to see how Sorensen kind of adapts. But what we're pointing out is there are currently issues with this defense. There are several issues with this defense that are prompting it to underperform when it shouldn't be, right? The defense shouldn't. The defense right now is clearly the issue with this team. It's not the offense. And that's saying when the defense is almost, well, right now it's at full health, even though, this past week, whereas the offense is without several all pros, and so we've got some issues. There are definitely some issues that you got to kind of iron out here sooner than later. The Niners, they have a solid matchup here in week 4 against New England, but this is another game where at the moment, right, if you're the Niners, can you really proudly predict them to win a game by double digits after the way that they've kind of played over the last 2 weeks?
Can they win by double digits in this game?
Can you predict them right now to just say, are they going to win by double digits? Like I at least myself, I've thought that the Niners were going to win comfortably in each of the last 2 weeks. I don't know if I have near the amount of confidence right now that they can do that.
The thing is can they stop the run? I mean, the Patriots they're a good running team, right? They're going to come in and they're going to run the ball, and they have a good running back, Ramondre Stevenson. They're going to come in and they're going to try to run the ball downhill. Now I know he didn't do anything last week against on Thursday night. Was it Thursday night they played?
Yeah, against the Jets. Jets are a solid run defense, but yeah.
So he didn't do nothing, but he could get downhill. He could run the ball. He's 11th in the NFL and has 224 yards, and that was before he had like 3 yards in week 3. Like he had literally nothing. So take out week 3, and if you do the first 2 weeks of the season, he was averaging like 5 to 6 yards a carry. So can they run the ball at the 49ers? And if they can, they could go play action. And we just saw what the Jets did to the Patriots offense, right? We saw them abuse them, do everything they wanted. They couldn't throw the ball. They couldn't run the ball. How can the 49ers defense play against this team? And I think you should be able to beat this team by double digits. They don't have a good quarterback. They don't have any weapons on offense. We also said that the Rams didn't have any weapons on offense, and there was guys running wide open. I think they can, Rohan. I think it's just a matter of selling out to stop the run, and going a little bit. I think the Niners got to go a little bit away from that man coverage look that they're constantly running. Go a little more cover 2, go cover 4. Now cover 2 and cover 4. It's going to be a lot harder to stop the run. It is, because now you have a less guy in the box, but you could do things out of those because you have Fred Warner, who's really good at stopping the run. You have 2 linebackers. Devondre Campbell should be good at stopping the run. That's what he should be. That's his forte because he's no longer good. He's not. I never thought he was good. Didn't like the signing. Still don't like the signing. But if you're going to have him on the field, might as well go cover 2, cover 4, because when he's in man, he's getting his ass cooked.
Right. And I mean, that's true. He is. I don't know. I guess I'm in a complete wait and see mode just because the Niners do need to make a change. And I think it's philosophically that they need to make a change. And this is where it kind of gets unfortunate because the loss to Javon Hargrave is pretty darn big. One guy that I thought struggled specifically in the run game, and this isn't really a surprise because it's happened in the past, I did not like what I saw from Kevin Givens in the run. He didn't have many snaps, but he was pushed. He was the worst run defender on the interior of this game. And right now, Kevin Givens is probably, going to earn an uptick in snaps.
Did you say Kevin Givens is the worst run defender on the team, Rohan?
He was in that game, yeah.
I've been saying this for the last 3 years. He's freaking terrible at run defense, man. I don't know why we bring this guy back. I truly don't know why I get he's cheap or whatever, but when you're looking at Kevin Givens, truthfully, Rohan, I'm trying to keep it buck. He's not good. He's really not good.
Yeah, and the guy who a lot of people expect now to take over, right, is Jordan Elliott. Jordan Elliott has the pedigree of being a good run defender. I don't know if I've necessarily seen it as much on film this year, but Jordan Elliott, the main issue with him is, are you going to trot out a defensive line that includes Jordan Elliott and Leonard Floyd in the pass rushing department Elliott has 36 pass rushing snaps this year. He has one pressure. He doesn't win really one-on-ones when it comes to the pass rushing game. And I don't know how much of a hit you can take unless you're going to be blitzing at a higher rate. If you throw both of those guys out there at the same time, and really if you throw anybody else out there at that defensive end position, because the Niners were succeeding with pass rushing stats, Marco pointing them out at the beginning of this, at the beginning of the show, because of the interior pressure. Interior pressure helped with Nick Bosa, and those three were the main guys creating pressure. Hargrave is a big loss for that interior pressure, even if he didn't have the best run defense. And I think that right now the Niners, I don't know if they have a solution on the defensive line. The guys that they currently have, they're already kind of struggling with depth. At defensive end, they don't have a fourth guy, right? That's why Floyd and Yetur Gross-Matos, well, really Floyd because Gross-Matos was injured, but that's why Floyd's playing so much. Okanayu got a few snaps, Robert Beal got a few snaps, but it's really Floyd playing a lot of snaps, and he hasn't gotten much production out of it. The Niners run 3D ends, and then they also run, I believe it's only 4D tackles with Hargrave, Givens, Malik Collins, and then obviously Jordan Elliott as well. Now you're down one more D tackle. I really have questions now about the D line and where they're not only going to be able to stop the run, but where they're also going to generate pressure outside of those two guys.
You know how they stop the run, Rohan?
Go ahead.
There's a guy on the team who I thought should have made the team because of how good he was against the run in preseason, how he looked at training camp. His name's Evan Anderson. 320-pound guy. Check this out. If you're going to be wide nine, right, there's only one way to stop the run in the wide nine. If you're going to be in the wide nine and you don't want to have a change your scheme on rundown, you got to have a big ass body in there, someone that's hard to move, and he could grab grass, anchor down, and not get kicked out on double teams on the down blocks when teams are trying to down block on him. And I think that's if you're gonna try to stop the run, Jordan Elliott, he's better at stopping the run. He's more physical, and then Malik Collins, 6'4". But when, like you're saying, pass rush,
it's going to take a hit then. If you're playing Evan Anderson, it's going to take a hit.
But I would rather take a hit getting after the quarterback on rundowns than allowing teams to run the ball at 4.5 yards per carry and allowing them to get to the play action. Because now if you're stopping the run at a very high rate, now these teams aren't going to be running the ball at you. They're going to be trying to throw the ball on early downs. And I think Evan Anderson has a little bit more juice than the people give him credit for. I thought Evan Anderson was pretty solid when it came to getting after the quarterback in preseason. So for me, I think that is probably the best bet for the 49ers if you want to stop the run. And I know Chris Kasarik has been very vocal of Evan Anderson. He's talked highly of him. I think that's the best bet for the 49ers. Get him on the field.
And I'll say this, and I'm not going to throw any shade or anything like that. Chris Kasarik, it's been reported, right, that he has more input this year with the defense, specifically with the defensive line. I want him to also, not necessarily be better, but find different ways to implement this defensive line rotation outside of the wide nine, right? You don't want to be as reliant on the wide nine. I wonder, that's why I said earlier, do they go more bare fronts, right? Do they try and create or eat more space and trust those DBs on in the back with the 5 down front? What do they ultimately do? Because at the moment, the wide nine is not working, specifically in the run game.
Yeah, and it's hard to implement something because the wide nine is essentially the 49ers defense of alignment on how they want to get after things. They want the wide nine because it allows you to get after the quarterback, right? It allows that the edge rush naturally allows the edge rusher to loop, and it's easier to get pressure from. But in my opinion, I think when you have one of the best edge rushers in the NFL and Nick Bosa, I don't think you need the wide nine. I think you could, truthfully, you could go away from the wide nine because he's going to get pressure no matter what. He's going to get after the quarterback no matter what his alignment is. I don't like the wide nine. I would like to hear from Nick Bosa. And I think this is I'm going to put this out there. I think some of the reporters should put this out there. They should ask Kyle Shanahan. They should ask Nick Bosa. Right? Nick Bosa he's been doing a lot of media sessions, right? One-on-one at his locker. What's your thoughts of the Y9 and stopping the run? Because you guys are struggling to stop the run. The Y9 is a defense that has never been a defense to stop the Y9. Do you think you need a schematic change midseason to stop the run? Do you think this is something that, especially losing Hargrave, right? One of your best defensive tackles. How do you adjust midseason when you lose a defensive tackle who's not just a starter? He's a $20 million starter. So it's a lot different when it's a $20 million player who's supposed to be giving you elite production. And I think that's a big concern, Ron, of mine at least.
And I think that's fair. I want to go to kind of my last issue of the day, one that we didn't necessarily see in week 3, but one that could be even more of an implication for this season. Christian McCaffrey. He was seen going to Germany. He's seen a specialist. Thoughts on that whole situation and his potential outlook for 2024? Do you think it's more grim right now? And when do you think he makes his return?
Not too sure. Truthfully, not too sure. When he returns. Now, I've asked a couple of guys like that I trust. Jeff Mueller. Specifically, I trust his word a lot. He's physical therapist and everything like that. So I asked him, hey, what are your thoughts on this, man? Like, what's going on? He put out a post explaining what he could possibly getting stem cell and stuff like that. And he essentially said, like, even though he gets a stem cell, it's still going to be an extra couple of weeks because you got to let that heal. It's a painful process, and it takes a lot on that body part, and still has a couple of weeks. So I think week 10 to week 12 is when we see Christian McCaffrey back. I don't think we see him anytime soon. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and I mean, is that a big concern for you? Do you think like I said, the offense is the best part of the team right now. But do you think? I think it's better than defense for sure right now.
It's better than defense, but it also our teams doing certain things to the Niners where it's allowing them to look great, right? Because now you're moving the ball, right? But correct. You don't have much. You're not putting in the end zone as much as you should be.
And that's fair. You know, if you're talking about them trying to be more successful in the red zone, I think that's a fair thing. But I also feel that kind of regresses more to the mean for the Niners specifically as the season goes on.
I mean, we hope so, right? We hope it gets to the average of what it should be. The only thing is, though, is like when you don't have a Christian McCaffrey, how do you feel about the
guy who had the most red zone touches last year? Yeah, that's true.
How do you not even that? How do you feel about the passing game? Because obviously the running game looks fine. The running game looks phenomenal with Jordan Mason. I think he's like leading the league in rushing yards, or top 3 in rushing yards, if I'm not mistaken. What are your thoughts on the passing game? Because obviously Jordan Mason's number 2 in the league at 324 rushing yards. What's your thoughts on the passing game? Because obviously the gravitational pull that Christian McCaffrey has, there's an effect on what's going on, right? In my opinion, middle of the field is being taken away a little bit more.
Yeah.
Is this something defenses are doing where they're giving Brock Purdy that deeper shot, where they're bigger chunk plays, where they're making him look a little bit different? And that's why he has the most passing yards in the NFL, because defenses are playing him differently without a Christian McCaffrey. Now, he is proving them wrong. He is beating them, and he does look the part. He looks great. But is this a reason? Is there a reason for them doing this?
I think that when you talk about the way defenses are playing, Brandon Ayuk said it today. They're playing him differently. They're trying to take away Brandon Ayuk. And we saw that in the Rams game, right? The reason, I'm not going to say the reason. I'm not going to put any, take away anything from Juwan Jennings' big game. But Jennings had a lot of one-on-one opportunities and had a lot of, favorable chances, because when the Rams are playing single high shells, or when they have, an extra safety on the field, guess what? That player is gravitating towards Brandon Ayuk. You're trying to bracket him. You're trying to, take away those explosive opportunities that really led the 49ers offense back in 2023. And it's clear that that's something, that's happening. And so credit to Brock Purdy for finding different ways to succeed, specifically this past week, which was clearly his best week of the year. Credit to him for finding different ways to succeed. But the passing game, Purdy did struggle a little bit in week 2. And then Week 1 was fine, but Purdy did struggle a little bit in week 2. And so you wonder, how are teams going to adjust, but how also are the Niners going to adjust? Because even if teams are gravitating more towards Ayuk, you have to get him the ball. Ayuk has to catch the ball too. It's been a suboptimal start to the year for a guy who they just paid $30 million to. Now, I don't think that there should be any major conclusions like a lot of 49er fans are jumping to, but still, you're going to have to find a different way to succeed offensively. When you point to the red zone, the Niners were the number 1 team in the red zone last year. They scored a touchdown on 68% of their drives. Sure, you could say that might be a little bit more of an outlier, but there was a clear level of success last year, and this year right in the middle of the pack. They're at 50% this year. So a significant drop-off where they're right in the middle of the NFL. I believe it's 15th or 16th in the NFL. And so there's a change right in the red zone. And I think that that's important because the Niners get to the red zone so often that you have a significant opportunity to score more. Maybe the stats are skewed because they kicked, what was it, 6 field goals or so in week 1. So maybe the stats are skewed a bit, but regardless, you want to punch in more touchdowns and you want to score, get to that 30-point barrier, right? The Niners had 32 in week 1, only 17 in week 2, only 24 in week 3. Their goal should be to hit the 30-point barrier, and I know offense is down and things like that in the NFL overall, but I think that you're going to want to try and find a way to get back to that top 5 scoring offense that you had last year, and that means doing different things in the passing game.
And I think when you look at people who are criticizing Brandon Ayuk, right, there's one thing that I really like about stats that allow us to see Brandon Ayuk, right? So for Brandon Ayuk's air yards and stuff like that, people are like, "Oh, Brandon Ayuk isn't getting open." So NFL Plus does a phenomenal job of this kind of stuff, and I'm actually falling in love, Rohan. I can't lie to you. I might end up having to pay for this because I'm falling in love, bro. It's phenomenal just being able to look up these kind of stats so easy, but also it ties the film to it. Like I could pull the plays, right? And it's so Brandon Ayuk this season. He has 2 targets of 20 yards, of 20 plus yards. On those 2 targets, his yards of separation are at 1.2. Right? Intermediate, 10 and 19 yards. He has 11 targets. He has 7 of those 7 receptions on those 11 targets. He's averaging on those 10 and 19, 13 yards per reception. His completion catch rate over expected on the intermediate routes are at plus 14.4%. His average yards of separation, 2 yards of separation.
I was about to say, because the 2-yard marker is where you really say that's well above average. So I was going to
wide ass open in the NFL. To me, that's wide open in the NFL. Not wide ass open, but it's wide open in the NFL.
Yeah.
If you have a yard of separation, that's open. Under 10 yards, he has 7 targets. His catch percent or his completion rate over expected is at minus 19, and that's why a lot of people were like, "Hey, come on, you're dropping the ball." That's where it's at. You know what his average yards of separation are on those?
Probably 2.6. A lot with the deep ball. Yeah, 2.6. That's another pretty well above average, number.
This season, I know a lot of people keep killing Brandon Ayuk. You know what his average yards of separation are on the entire season on all targets?
I would assume around 2.
2.1. You know what it was last year? 2.9. So not much. He's still 2 yards of separation. Last year was almost 3, right? But it's still 2 yards. That's last year. We were constantly seeing Brandon Ayuk wide ass open, where 3 yards of separation and someone's not next to you. There's about an arm length or so. That's a big freaking gap of separation. So everyone's not seeing that. They're like, "Hey, Brandon Ayuk, you're not yourself this year," but he's still wide open. It's, to me, what's making it harder is with teams in the cover 2 and cover 4 a lot more this season is you have that guy over the top on Brandon Ayuk at all times now, right? You have that dude shadowing him. So now the tight window throws have to be perfect. They have to be on the money. And obviously he had a drop or 2. I believe that's what he was charted as, 1 drop or 2 drops in this past game. So that needs to get cleaned up. But I think it's more so than anything, it's the way teams are playing with the cover 2 and cover 4. I think the quarterback has to be just as accurate more than ever. And I think last year there was a little bit more wiggle room for Brock to be a little off target. And I'm not saying Brock is off target this year. I'm just saying that's the difference that we're seeing. There's another thing I wanted to bring up. Is Trent Williams an issue right now?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if he's an issue, but I do think that you've seen a little bit of a step down, at least early on, and I think that that's probably reflective of him not being there throughout the training camp portion, throughout the preseason portion, because I guess conditioning could be a thing, but also, yeah, there have been some lapses. Now, I do think that they are a little overblown, but I do also think when you talk about Trent Williams, with everybody treating him, with as high respect as they do, which is well deserved, there are some lapses there that you do question.
What about the offensive line as a whole?
I will say specifically from week 3, I thought they were better than I initially thought, but I also think that Brock Purdy is uplifting them by creating some positive plays out of plays that definitely should be negative plays when it comes to the pressure that he's facing. I think when you talk about the offensive line as a whole, like I said, better week in week 3. When I see the struggles, let's start with the run game specifically. They struggle with power. It's something that I told you earlier. Short distance situations, red zone situations, that's where they struggle, and that's where even when you have a guy like Jordan Mason who's able to kind of bail you out with some of those physical runs, that's where you're seeing the Niners struggle because they get pushed back in these, in these short distance situations, and they aren't able to generate enough yardage to sometimes convert those. I think that that's big. And then in the run or in the pass game, Colton McKivitz still is not looking good. He has struggled. He very directly led to the turnover last week, the fumble, where Brock Purdy he's thrown in under 2.5 seconds and he doesn't have time to throw the football because he gets hit. And I think that there have been a couple of times where Purdy has bailed out McKivitz, but also where McKivitz has struggled, right? Be it with penalties or be it with the pressures that he's kind of given up. And so I think this O line is still fine. I think it's fine, but I think that you're starting to see some of the issues kind of as well over the first 3 weeks.
What are your takes? Because there's two stats that that for me that have been thrown around on Twitter for Brock, and it's not sure how I really view them because it's a couple of different things that I've seen on film. Just want to get your take on Purdy's time to throw is at
Okay.
3.05, right? 3 seconds, really high. His quarterback pressure rate is at 36.8. Now people are looking at this, right? And there's
36.8. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
people look at this and they're like, Brock is getting extremely pressured. 36.8% is a pretty high rate to get pressured as a
Yeah.
quarterback. Every third throw you're making, you're getting pressured.
Hmm.
That's a pretty high rate. Now, do you think that's because Brock is holding on to the ball a little bit longer than he normally would? And what it's caused, and the reason for it is because teams are sending there's times 3 teams are dropping that extra guy in coverage because they're trying to take away a space. Do you think that's the reason that the pressure rate is higher? Because now Brock is starting to scramble, holding on to that ball a little bit longer, and when he goes to release, there's someone in his face. Or what's the reason for this high pressure rate, and what's the reason for the high time to throw?
Yeah. I think that there is a multitude of things. One, I've looked at Brock Purdy's time to throw, and it's a very interesting kind of chart. Week 2, we talked about it. I thought Brock held on to the ball a little too long, looking for some of those more explosive shots rather than hitting the checkdowns and what was given to him. That led to him holding the ball on a little longer, and I believe he averaged 3.02 seconds in terms of time to throw, which was one of the higher marks of the week. This past week, Brock Purdy held on to the ball for 3.39 seconds, and it was one of his best games it was his best game of the season. And so I think it tells two different stories. This week, I think Purdy, rather than necessarily holding on to the ball too long, from what I saw at least, I thought he was creating a lot of plays. I think the pressure, when it came, Purdy was able to escape it and create a lot of plays. And I also think when it comes to the pressure, yes, there was pressure, but also they were flushed out to where Purdy's either able to step up into the pocket or Purdy's able to move left or right. You could also, though, see that Purdy felt affected by it a little bit because he left the pocket sometimes early in order to create plays. But they worked out really well for the 49ers, and so it kind of worked out well on Purdy's regard. I don't know if he's holding on to the ball too long if you're talking about the entire body of work. I think he did in week 2. And I think in week 3, the pressure kind of caused the extra time to throw because Purdy is extending plays and things like that, where obviously your time to throw is going to increase. So the 36% pressure rate is high. I think that that is a concern. I'm curious to see how much came directly in week 2, whereas how much came in the rest of the weeks, because I thought they protected well in week 1, and I was not impressed necessarily, but I thought they played better than expected for my initial watch in week 3. And then Purdy's time to throw, I think it's honestly a week to week case because his time to throw is much higher in week 3 than week 2. But I thought was more he was more to blame for his, I guess, holding onto the football more in week 2 than week 3.
I get what you're saying, and for me, when I go back and watch and everything like that for Brock, I feel like there's times where he's leaving the pocket when it's clean, and
Yeah,
I something I noticed in the past where he's done it, but I feel like this year he may feel like he has to play a little bit hero ball, right? Now you don't have CMC, you don't have Debo, no Kittle last week, so like kind of feel like maybe I have to be a little bit more of a hero. I have to do a little bit more. There was times where I felt like there was a clean pocket and he had someone open. I know
I
people.
thought that was there pretty, not pretty often, but I thought that was there a number of times this past week. The only difference is he actually created positive plays even when that happened, and so it kind of reflected still pretty well on his part.
And I know like the average yards of separation for at least in the target and the the way average yards of separation works for um, NFL Plus, it's when the receiver is targeted. So whether it's a drop or a catch, is when he's targeted. That's where it dictates. So it's not necessarily, for example, let's say Rohan's the first read and I'm running offense. Rohan is the first read and he's blanketed, right? Covered completely. It doesn't dictate whether that's what I think the stats a little flawed because it doesn't go by off of every route. So it goes off of when the ball's thrown to him. So for example, anytime the receiver is being thrown to, there's yards of separation. So that also could be a factor too, where it's like, hey, you know what? This third down, nobody was open, so I had to hold the ball. I had to take that extra half second and scramble to find somebody. Um, what are your thoughts on Jake Brendel?
Up and down. Now, upon review of this week's film, I didn't think Brendel was as bad as I thought he was when I watched the game live. Now, I think still Brendel is not good. I still don't think he's that great. I don't know exactly where he'd rank in terms of centers, just because how many I don't know that there are that many elite centers in the NFL, or above average centers in the NFL. So maybe Brendel ranks in the average range of those centers, or in the below average range. But I do think that the struggles that we've talked about throughout the offseason and even in last year are carrying over. When I talk about the run game and people struggling with power, Jake Brendel struggles a lot, in those situations. In pass pro, Brendel didn't have, I believe it was week 1 that I watched where he struggled a bit, or it was week 1 or week 2 where I watched where he struggled a bit, and so I don't know. There are still a lot of questions when it comes to Jake Brendel, and I think that the Niners would very much think about a potential move to John Feliciano if the issues continue to compound and if Feliciano can return to be healthy at the midseason mark.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I watch Jake Brendel, I think it's more so in the run game where it's noticeable. Pass game, there's not really one on one much, right? He's kind of helping out or doing other things, and when he is one on one, sometimes he'll get help from somebody. Um, for me, I'm gonna answer Corey Soto's, and it's kind of question. It's a great question, Corey. Um, will all topics be valid and on the table if we lose this game? I think this is a must-win
I
game.
think they're already on the table. I think there are questions of how good is this 49ers team already, especially with the injuries that they're facing and with the way that they lost this last game, with the concerns that not just because of the loss, just because of the concerns that have started to rise. Where are there a long-term fix for them right now? I don't know if they're the best team in the NFC. And that's not even the Niners' goal, right? We always talk about Super Bowl, especially this year when it comes to the Niners. So, yeah, I definitely.
if there's one thing, Rohan, you could pick out and you could say the Niners must be better. Obviously, I want to get to. I hope you have time, but so let me know if you don't. But I wanted to ask you your thoughts on John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. Right, John Lynch went on record last week, and he goes, "We could see Jacob Cowan getting playing time. We could see, or we should see him." Save it. Should I wait?
Tomorrow.
All
We
right.
got
All right. All right. We got a show tomorrow, so we'll talk about that. We could talk about that as well tomorrow. But for the 49ers, how do they change the narrative this season going forward? Like, do they just because if they come out and they win, right? I mean, a win is a win, but if you barely beat a Patriots team who isn't good by 3, does that change your mind on the 49ers in any way? Right? Because, like, obviously a loss is drastic, right? Loss probably like, oh, yeah, we're definitely not winning this division because now you're 3 games back. You're definitely looking at this team probably in a different perspective. If they lose, like, oh, snap. If they win, it's okay. But they're getting back on track. But if they win a certain way, right? If they win by 3 points or 1 point, are you looking at this team like, yeah, this isn't a Super Bowl contender?
I think right now you're already thinking about it, right? If they lose this game, 100% that's on the table, because these are 2 games now. The one of the biggest questions about Super Bowl contenders is their response to adversity, right? The Niners have now dropped 2 in a row. You can't. This is a must win. You can't drop 3 in a row. Why? Because 1, you've already lost a conference game. You're then going to lose 3 in a row going into another conference game, and conference games really matter when it comes to the playoff schedule. I'm still thinking the Niners win the NFC West. I am, even after the 1 and 2 start. But you want to put yourself in as favorable a position as possible to win the Super Bowl. That's the goal every single year. The most favorable position is winning the 1 seed. The Niners did that last year. They got through the NFC, and they still weren't able to come up. If you aren't the 1 seed this year, you're not in the best position to win the Super Bowl. You're going to have to play at least 1 road game before the Super Bowl in order to reach your final destination. And also, the AFC is a lot better than the NFC, right? And so let's just assume that it's the Kansas City Chiefs again. If you are struggling more this year than you are last year, while the Chiefs are looking better this year than they are last year, what makes you have confidence that the 49ers can beat the Chiefs, right, in the Super Bowl? And so I think that there are questions like that to be had, and they would start next week if you ended up losing to a Patriots team that just lost 24-3, right? I understand they're coming off a few more extra days of rest, but the Niners beat the Jets, and the Jets beat the Patriots. I'm not saying it's as simple as that, but the Jets whooped the Patriots. The Niners can stop the run. This is going to be a pretty clear win. If they can generate pressure, it's going to be a pretty clear win. And so when you ask me about what would give me confidence kind of going forward, I think it starts with the defense. I think it starts with Nick Sorensen, and I think it starts with the defensive line specifically and being able to generate pressure and stopping the run.
I like this question from Corey Rohan, and I want you to answer it because you're like the cap expert, or you're like the guy
Yeah.
who I usually go to for cap. He says, "Is CMC's contract structured so that if he were to retire early, he would forfeit money?"
No. Retirements don't really force a player to forfeit money in terms of the guaranteed money. Now, obviously, the 49ers wouldn't necessarily pay him the salary for the years later, but McCaffrey got $24 million guaranteed at signing. And I believe he got like 14.3 million in a signing bonus. That's already gone, right? And then the only other portion of it is, I believe, like a $8.5 million option bonus. If he were to retire, the Niners incur a $22 million dead cap in next year. And so it's pretty significant. You'd probably stretch it out to post June 1st. Now, of course, I don't think anybody's getting to the range of CMC retiring right now, but it also depends on the year. If he chooses a early retirement, because if it's the year after, it's not as big of a deal. Or if it's like I think in 2026 or 27, it's not as big of a deal. But no, he would not forfeit money.
And I think too, like the way it was structured, it was structured in a way that the 49ers kind of knew how big the injury was. Because because the way I saw it was, let's just drop those cap numbers to the next 3 years, and then him probably missing this year, right? Which is a lower cap number. The next two are also lower. He hits that like 30 age range, then they could get out on the contract without having like drastic dead money. So I think that's kind of how I saw, like they kind of knew how severe the injury was. Like, hey, might be one of his last couple of years. Let's adjust it so we're not taking big cap numbers over the next couple of years, and then we have an out. And I think that's probably the best way to do it, especially with the reigning offensive player of the year. Shout out to Dedicated Gaming Platform. Appreciate you, my man. Good time for Hargrave to go down against the run defense, right? Replace him with Evan Anderson. I'm telling you, that's the best way to stop the run. Evan Anderson or nothing. No, who would you bring up, bro? Obviously, Kalia Davis in a couple of weeks, but who would you bring up this week to obviously? I think I know what you're gonna say, but who would you bring up?
If I'm being honest, I don't think it makes a difference. I really don't. I think the Niners are going to have to go outside and make a move if they really want to improve their run defense. That's just my honest answer. Yeah, go ahead.
And who would you try to trade for then? Like obviously, there's Ty McGill on the practice squad. You could try to, I thought you were going to say him, bring him up.
But that helps with pass rush. I don't think it helps that much with the run defense either.
I'm telling you, run defense, Evan Anderson. If you want to stop the run, no, it's gonna, like you said earlier, it's gonna affect you drastically when it comes to getting after the quarterback.
You're probably going to throw more on running downs, right? Just knowing that you probably have a better chance, against that pass rush. There are a couple of things, but also, what do you call it? In terms of a trade, that probably only gets facilitated at the deadline with the new playoff format and with teams, even the teams that aren't projected to do as well. They usually have young quarterbacks, right? They're trying to grow that team. They're trying to grow chemistry. It's not a good sign to try and trade a guy 4 weeks through the season. I think that only happens at the deadline when teams try and get as much capital as they can and pivot to 2025. So you're going to have to go the next 4 weeks probably with your current unit.
So I saw someone say get someone off the practice squad of the Raiders. The only guy I see on the practice squad of the Raiders is Matthew Butler, the defensive tackle. I don't know if that's the guy you're talking about, but
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the guy you're talking about, but that's the only defensive tackle I see on the Raiders practice squad, JD. But man, it's a tough situation for the Niners to be in, huh, Rohan?
Yeah, no, it is, and it's really unfortunate. The injury is a really unfortunate one, especially after that type of loss. It's just not a great sign. Yeah.
But I know we talked about
the practice squad real quick. If you are poaching off the practice squad, you have to sign them to the active 53. So the Niners probably aren't going to do that. They're probably going to add players to the practice squad and then elevate them rather than sign them to the active 53 immediately.
But why not? If Javon Hargrave is going on the IR anyways.
What I mean is they're probably going to sign one of their players to the active 53, and then they're going to sign somebody else to the practice squad. They already added Shaquille Brown, I believe, to the practice squad.
They did.
So if Javon, like for example, Evan Anderson, I believe Anderson's already on the practice squad, but they could, let's say, elevate T.Y. McGill to the active roster, right, and have him be a part of the active 53, or they could elevate Sam Okanayu to the active roster, or a move like that.
I'm all for not bringing Ty McGill. A 32-year-old, about to be 32 in November. Like, let's bring someone young. Let's see what he has, right? Like Evan Anderson, bring him up. If he doesn't have it, guess what? You cut him. Like, even if you don't activate him to your 53, let's see what he is. Like, you're not gonna, like we're both saying, like, it's not gonna be a drastic change right away this week. Make a move, see what happens. If he plays well, he plays well. But man, they're in a tough situation. My last question before we got here, Rohan. Does Nick Sorensen change things around this defense this week? Sorry, with this defense, does he change anything around this week?
I don't know. I don't know if he's going to have to really against what do you call it? I don't think he's going to really have to against New England. I think the Niners are going to get away with it just because you're probably going to add extra or really pay more attention in the box, knowing the Patriots don't really have that elite number one receiver. The guy who they'll probably focus on is Demario Douglas. I wonder if they play more zone coverage because he's a slot guy. You want to take away the space that he usually is able to, to thrive in. I think that that's going to be a potential change. Maybe you don't need to play as much man coverage just because of the opponent that you're facing, but I don't know if you see that many changes this week just because of the opponent, and also because do you expect, you know, I don't know what my expectations are really with Nick Sorensen right now. It's more for me. I'm waiting and seeing what exactly is he going to change on a week in and week out basis.
I think if we don't see an adjustment and the Patriots offense looks efficient or the Patriots offense looks good against us, I think that it'll be time to truly say there needs to be a change. They don't have nothing on offense, and I could like Stevenson.
Their offensive line is makeshift, right? Their offensive line isn't great.
One thing that Ryan got away with this past week, we were supposed to record on Tuesday, and I hope Ryan sees this. So if someone wants to clip this, send this to Ryan. He said that the Niners defensive line would have, I believe when he said 6 sacks against Matthew Stafford. How many sacks did they have against Matthew Stafford?
He had 6?
No. He said they were. He said they would get 6.
Oh, he said they would get 6. I don't think they got more than 1 or 2. No, they got 3.
And one of them was one of them like where he gave himself up, right?
Yeah, one he gave himself up. That was, I believe, I forget if Okanayu got charged with that sack. Yeah, he gave himself up.
So that's interesting. So makeshift offensive line for the Rams. A lot of us I thought they would only get 2. I said I don't think they get more than 2 to 3. A lot of people thought we're going to get a lot of sacks. Is this something that you expect us to get better at throughout the season, especially against the Patriots, who gave up like 7 or 8 against the Jets?
I think if the Niners make a move, they would get better throughout the season. If not, I think they're going to hang around that 10 to 15 range, maybe somewhere around there, 10 to 15, 10 to 16 range with sack percentage this year.
You really want them to make a trade, and I'm kind of curious. That's usually you don't say make a move this early.
I don't see any other solution right now, right? You talked about T.Y. McGill. We've seen T.Y. McGill play. And maybe I'm proven wrong. Evan Anderson and Shaquille Brown, if one of them kind of get the move up, they play well, right? It's just I haven't seen them play enough to the stage. Are they going to be able to hold up against competition, knowing that, guess what, Evan Anderson, we're gonna use a bunch of zone reads, right? And they're gonna run in zone, run a little bit away from Evan Anderson, and force him to use his suboptimal athleticism, to try and defend the run. And so that's something that I could see them teams doing. Shaquille Brown's a smaller guy; he's around 295 pounds. I wonder how teams would treat him. But also, I don't think that they're phased with their game plans against the Niners, just knowing with the wide 9 that they're going to be able to get success as they've done against starters. And so that's why I don't see how you don't make a move, knowing that right now you really have 2 good pass rushers. The rest have been underperforming. Leonard Floyd specifically has been underperforming. And then at D tackle, right, even at best you're going to get an average pass rusher. If it's Kevin Givens, that's an average pass rusher, right? If it's T.Y. McGill, average pass rusher at best, right? And so if you truly want to make if you truly want to see this Nick Sorensen defense kind of get alive, if you want to see man coverage, if you want to see things like that, you're going to need a good defensive line that at least can do one of the 2 things. Can they stop the run at a high level, or can they pass rush at a high level? You've got to at least focus on one. And the Niners right now, I don't know if they do either at a high level, and that's saying with Nick Bosa being there. And this is not at all a slight against Nick Bosa, but you have to at least challenge teams, because all they're going to do now is double Bosa or double Collins and force the other guys to win one-on-ones, which has happened, for Leonard Floyd, 6% of the time this year? That's really low.
Yeah, it's just interesting because we went from week 1 where everything looked great, right, against the Jets. The run defense, and right after we played the Jets, I said, you know what? Let's put a pause on what we just saw defensively. I was like, because 1, they didn't have to run the ball, and 2, the Niners got them out of their game plan real fast by getting up real fast. And I felt like that was something where we didn't see the Jets get into their actual game plan or the actual offense, which was more so because of the 49ers offense running the ball at an efficient rate and putting up points right away. And so that's why I was a little worried. And then week 2 and week 3, just defensively, it just hasn't looked good at all. And that's, like you're saying, that you got to make a move, because if you want to stay in a lot of more man and cover ones, cover zeros, and stuff like that, you got to have a good pass rush to get after the quarterback and make him get the ball out early. Because if not, being one-on-one for more than 2.5, 3 seconds, you're going to get cooked. Like, I'm just sorry. There's no corners that are going to be covering for that long of a period. And, man, I felt like we had looked a pretty good long show. That was a long show today.
No, it was a good show. I mean, we got a lot to talk about with the issues. And the fun part is we're going to get to do this all over again, with some fun topics as well, either tomorrow or Friday.
Yeah, we should be on tomorrow. Hopefully everyone tunes in. Make sure you guys go over to Rohan Chakravarthi's channel. Hit that subscribe button. You guys should be subscribed there if you're on Twitter or anything. Go to Clutch Gene Sports. Hit that subscribe button as well. We'll be back live tomorrow around 3 o'clock, Ron.
Yeah, I think so.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. We'll see you guys next week then. Or, sorry, tomorrow then. My bad.
Yeah, Rohan don't want to record tomorrow. See that?